I'm going to test this Ronin Katana. You can see that the blade is not marred up or messed up at all yet. Everything is intact, tight, no wiggle. We'll see how it holds up.
There's a couple quick notes before we start. First, I'm not an employee of Ronin Katana, but I am a lucky son of a bitch that gets to break these blades that are sent to me for free, which is awesome, I know. Two, I want you to make up your own mind. I present some stuff here, listen to it, don't listen to it, but at least evaluate it and decide for yourself. Lastly, this is wildly dangerous stuff, so please don't do it without at least considering how dangerous it is. I'm going to cover some of my initial impressions of the blade. First off, this saya is gloss, and it shows fingerprints relatively easily. You should keep that in mind. The tsuka shape is very comfortable. I wear a large glove size. I found it very easy to grip. The ito wasn't loose, and it seemed to be tight overall. There was no wiggle in the blade. The tsuba, the fittings, the tsuka, nothing rattled initially when I got the blade. The tsuba as well, even though it has these cutouts, didn't bite at my fingers. The shape prevented my fat stubby fingers from getting cut in there. The habaki also seems to fit reasonably well and didn't wiggle. The shape of the blade I thought was nice enough. It doesn't have a hamon or anything really aesthetic. It has a very homogeneous appearance across the blade, and the lines overall are decent for a blade of its price category. Unfortunately, there were some camera difficulties that prevent me from showing you the earlier tests I did. Effectively, I'm bad at camera work and I pressed the wrong button. I digress. I started with water bottles in a logical order. We basically started with light target cutting before I moved to this medium and hard target cutting like rolled up newspaper and wood respectively. Unfortunately, that video was lost, so I'm showing you the video in the order that they occurred rather than in the logical series of progression and tests. I will do some water bottle cutting shortly, but it took place after rolled newspapers. This is some photos of the rolled newspaper that was cut with the Ronin O-Katana that was used in the testing here. Unfortunately, there were some camera difficulties on my part and I wasn't able to capture all of the good cuts that were made with this blade. I got some of the photo evidence afterward, however, many of the best cuts were regrettably missed by my poor cameramanship. The blade's been through a pretty good amount of cutting at this point. Nothing is loose though. The ito is still tight, the fujikashira is still tight, the tsuba is still tight, the habaki is still tight, and I don't see any type of edge rolling. There are some stains from the water bottle glue and the sap in the trees and stuff that I was cutting, but I don't sense any edge roll and I don't spot any nicks or damage of any kind. The damage along the edge is pretty significant as soon as I started attacking another blade with edge-on-edge contact. It's another Ronin Katana from a previous test that's being used. It's strapped to my stand. And you can see that there's about a depth of 4 millimeters along the edge of the blade, as well as some good-sized scuffs along the back of the blade. I struck the other blade with a little bit more oomph, and then I took a pipe and started hitting the blade. And then I bent the blade, and this is the damage that you can see afterward. The damage along the edge wasn't really much more significant with a lot more force behind the cutting. I didn't see much go beyond 3 to 4 millimeters, maybe a 5 millimeter depth, but most of them stuck between the 3 and 4 millimeter mark. You can also see that the habaki is loosened up, and somewhere along the testing the kashira was lost. I don't know exactly where that took place, but the kashira did come off during the test. The ito is still tight, and I don't sense any rattle in the suka core. The only thing that I really notice is the looseness in the habaki, as well as the kashira coming off. These photos provide a little bit closer view of the damage after the blade was struck against the target a little bit harder, and after the pipe was used to hit the edge of the blade repeatedly. I've reached a point in the testing where I don't feel really very comfortable beating it against things anymore. First of all, it's exhausting. That armor is heavy, as I've mentioned before, but I'm not having a whole lot of luck just beating it against a sword or wood or any other inanimate object and getting any luck in terms of showing you something tangible and worthwhile. So the next step that I'm going to do is I'm going to unwrap the suka, and I'm going to look for any kind of defects. The first thing that I do is I remove the two mikugi pegs, and then I begin unwinding it. Now, I don't know exactly what the pattern is. They're crossed or something, but basically the handle won't unwind if it's cut or damaged. You can see that it's a little bit of a chore, but they're effectively wrapped in such a way that the handle won't completely unwind if it's damaged. The suka appeared in good standing initially after I took it off, but when I split it apart, you could pretty clearly see that there was some cracking that took place that wasn't simply along the seam. In defense, I didn't feel it while I was testing. However, there was some cracking in the suka, not just in the seam area. Now, as I've mentioned, conventional methods of testing are not yielding me a whole lot of great results. So I'm going to take a slightly different approach. I'm going to strap the blade into the vise, and I'm going to bend it back and forth, because beating it on an inanimate object is only yielding me perhaps weight loss, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. The try to break a sword diet while dangerous is great for one's health. Actually, it's probably very detrimental for one's health. Don't take that seriously. So what you've seen me do so far is bend the blade back and forth. To what angle, I'm not 100% sure. It looks like a pretty steep angle, but the angle that I'm taking it to is when I feel enough resistance that I sense that I'm not very comfortable with whatever's going to fly back at me if the blade breaks. That's kind of where I'm stopping. I'm bending it back and forth, and if you've seen some of the other videos that I've made, you know that sometimes that's enough to take a blade and break it in half. On any note, it's not doing a whole lot here, so I then start banging on it with a screwdriver, and I even take some of the Ronin European prototype that I was using in a previous video, and trying to use that as a wedge to drive between the blade and weaken it enough that I can break it. It's not working very well though, so I'm going to take it to a grinding wheel. I'm going to weaken the blade. Then I'm going to surround it with some stuff that makes me a little bit more comfortable with whatever shrapnel might be flying off of it, and I'm going to break it in half that way. These photos are for the metallurgists in the community. You can see the grain structure in the part that was broken and not hit by the grinding wheel. And overall, it seems pretty uniform and tight. That probably explains why it was so difficult for me to break. But hopefully these photos provide you some insight. This is the part of the video where I'm going to try and give you my 2 cents. Now, I'm changing the format of the videos that I do a little bit. Folks have asked me to give my opinion on the swords a little bit and include that. I do my best to try and keep my opinion out of the testing and let you make up your own mind. And I feel it's really important to note that I hope you've got the information you need to decide whether this sword is good, bad, right, wrong, or indifferent yourself. My mission is not to sell you anything, but to provide some information and have a good old hootenanny while I do it. So with that in mind, please don't take anything I say really too seriously. I'm not a very serious martial artist. I enjoy this as a hobby, but I'm by no means an expert, and this is just my personal opinion on the subject. Okay? So with that caveat, I'll give you my 2 cents. When I'm holding the Ronin O-Katana, I feel it's actually very comfortable. I'm 6'2" and you know, fatter than I should be. The overall balance and maneuverability of the blade for its size I find very comfortable, especially when I compare it to some of the other pieces that I've had that are of a similar vein. Now, there's not a whole lot of O-Katana that I've had personally, but I have had a couple, one from Cold Steel, their Warrior O-Katana, as well as a Dynasty Forge Musha O-Katana, if I'm saying those correctly. Both of those pieces were purchased secondhand. This Ronin Katana is a factory second, so perhaps it's you know, tomato, tomato, potato, potato type comparison. The Dynasty Forge Musha that I had was also a customized piece. I'll show some photos here of first the Dynasty Forge blade, and then the Ronin, and then the Cold Steel. From the photos you can see what I have in terms of O-Katana to compare it to from my personal experience, right? There's not a lot of O-Katana on the market, at least not that I've personally owned, but you do have an idea of the pieces that I've owned before. Now, the Dynasty Forge and the Cold Steel, I believe, are made in the same forge, so perhaps it's not fair to keep them both in comparison to the Ronin, but I'm limited on the amount of examples that I have for O-Katana to compare it to, so I'm going to use those as a point of reference. Now also, you're just going to have to trust me, I've cut with them, it was off camera and a long time ago, and I'm recollecting on that experience. When I remember cutting with the Cold Steel and the Dynasty Forge piece, they felt, as I recall, very unwieldy and tip heavy. That's not, you know, a criticism to Cold Steel. They're a very big, very hardy blade. I had no trouble moving through rolled newspaper, tatami, water bottles with either of those blades, but they did, as I recall, feel rather unwieldy. In comparison to the Ronin Katana, O-Katana that I tested here, it felt very maneuverable for its size. And it was honestly kind of fun to do a little bit of Aya off camera to test what it was like to use a longer blade for that. As a taller guy, it was nice to have a blade that's a little bit longer and forces me to stretch myself a little bit. Now, the other things that I like about the blade, if I'm being frank, honestly, it's a really strong sumbitch, right? It took me a lot of energy. I bent it back and forth, I beat it with a hammer, and you know, just beating it on inanimate objects didn't break it, and it does with some of the other blades. And when I bent it back and forth, it took a long time to really break it. I had to take it onto a grinding wheel to break it. And so in terms of the durability as a practice piece, I find that very valuable, right? It seems like a very durable piece, and for that side of things, durability, maneuverability, that combination, I believe, puts the value pretty high on the blade, especially for $325. Criticisms that I'd have, the Suka, the Kashira came off, right? And I didn't notice it. I would have liked to see it stay on there a little bit tighter. I don't know if it was the glue, the humidity where I was testing it. I could, you know, honestly, it's speculative on my part to know why it came off, but it did, and I would have liked to see it stay on. The Suka also cracked. You saw when I took it apart that it came apart pretty easily. Along the seam, there were some cracks along the seam and not along the seam. And I would like to have seen it you know, not crack, and have it be a little bit more thicker, fuller, or whatever it necessarily takes to make it not crack when I take it apart. So other than those two things, the blade stayed sharp for a long time. I didn't notice a lot of edge rolling. It's a good value, and if you have any other criticisms, critiques, comments, please put them in the commentary below. If you like the video and want to see more, subscribe, let me know what I'm doing right, wrong, or, you know, at least if you're gonna be super hateful, as always, make it funny. I like to read those. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to hear from you.